Yeah, so I had to reach back into the old memory banks to try and pull this one up because I definitely have the childhood memory of reading The Hobbit. But from that reading, like I can vividly remember some of the scenes and some specific kind of vignettes from the story that like man I can vividly remember myself reading it and my reaction to it. But I think the earliest time that I encountered Tolkien and sort of the memory that I actually have the most clear um, was the vinyl sort of, I guess, adaptation, the vinyl like soundtrack with accompanying book of The Hobbit, and I think that that was the animated movie that came out in like the 70s, and that was my grandfather's, and he had it lying around at his house, and I just kind of happened upon it. And as a little kid, I was first and foremost fascinated by the ability to play vinyl records at varying speeds and voice change all of the voice actors into sort of humorous versions of themselves. Anyone who's actually used vinyl probably knows what I'm talking about. But I eventually did actually just go through the whole thing, and it's still a pretty good memory of, dusting off some old vinyls with my grandfather as a kid, and kind of experiencing that with him and getting to learn a little bit about him and where he got it from, and just things that now you kind of maybe take for granted, and just a sweet memory that I can kind of go back to. So yeah, the book was there, but that vinyl is probably my first like real solid memory. Yeah, this is such a broad question, right? Like I mean, first of all, the world itself is broad, and I think that's probably where I'll try and start my answer, in that the breadth and probably more importantly the depth, I think, of Tolkien's world, the interconnectedness, the like generational lore that really stretches back, where like you can always find more about something. Um, so that really that depth of the world, and then I'd say probably the humanity of the world that he wrote. So the world was heavily influenced by Tolkien's experiences, um, and he used kind of his life and his sort of experience from that place and time to write this world. And in doing it, he wrote these characters that were, I mean, truly human, not just in the fact that there are human characters, but the humanness in terms of the complexity and the flaws and the weaknesses and strengths in tension within each of the characters and between the characters. And that complexity and realness of interactions between characters is something that I think is unique to truly high caliber artists and authors, and I think is something that is lacking in a lot of the stuff that we see today. And then the last thing I would say is the aspirational nature of his story. When you read Tolkien, you are first struck, I think, by, like I said, the realness of these characters, and the necessary corollary to that is the feats that they're able to accomplish, and the impressiveness of that, and what that says about what can be done by humans, by normal people. I mean, sure, a lot of the characters have, truly amazing powers and abilities, and are wise beyond things that we might aspire or believe ourselves to be. But at the end of the day, there's no perfect characters. They are all flawed in the way that we are flawed. And if they are individually and as a group able to overcome those flaws, in order to accomplish the deeds and the feats that they accomplish. That's an aspirational and an inspirational story for all of us. And I think that it's one of the reasons why, Tolkien is still so popular and still resonates with so many people, because anyone, regardless of who you are, can pick up Tolkien and say, well, I'm not an elf, but I can read this story and I can see myself in this character. I can see that they're struggling with the same things that I struggle with. And if they can pick themselves up after this terrible thing that they just went through and keep going, then I can keep going with the things that are going on in my life. And that is a message that is timeless. I thought about it for a while and I was like, man, can I pick somebody else that maybe hasn't already been talked about? And at the end of the day, I think I just got to go with my first response, which is Sam. Referring back to my previous answer about what really resonates with me about the story and the world that he created is the humanness and their ability to achieve great things despite that humanness. Sam is really the character that best illustrates that point. Sam's only superpower is loyalty. He is a steadfast friend. He's compassionate. He is, all of the things that you would want to be as a good person. But at the end of the day, there's nothing really special about Sam. Anyone who reads The Lord of the Rings can see themselves mirrored directly in Sam. And the fact that at the end of the story, Frodo turns to him and basically says, like, I wouldn't have gotten very far without you. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do this without you. Like, that I think is completely true. It highlights the importance of the character, but it also brings back the idea that even the sort of best of us can only accomplish what we can together, and that even if all you have to give is to be a loyal friend, sometimes that can mean the difference between light and darkness. That can mean the difference, honestly, that can make the world a difference. Anyone who's ever had somebody who dealt with, psychological or physical trauma or something like that understands the power of loyalty and compassion in a friend. And I think that the idea that Tolkien chose to hang the success of the Fellowship on Sam, who again was probably the least of the Fellowship in terms of ability, that I think says so much about him, the purpose of his story, and hopefully about us as the audience and people that read it. That's a difficult question because you gave me the last option, which is, does Tolkien's world only exist in the books? I want to say on one level, I think that's probably the most true answer, is that Tolkien's world exists in the books and it exists in the minds of the people that read the books. That said, I think that a good adaptation is possible. And I think that in terms of adaptations that we've seen, I think that the Peter Jackson adaptation does show us that it can be a good faith and I would use the word true adaptation. It's hard to say that because I know that there are things that are missing and that there were things that were changed. I think that the spirit was captured. I think that if any adaptation or if any work can be adapted, then I think that Tolkien can be adapted. And I think that of all the adaptations we've seen, Peter Jackson's was, in my opinion, the best. The first word that comes to mind when trying to describe what we've seen so far of Amazon's Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, which is a mouthful. The first word that comes to mind, I think, is shallow. So I said before that the world and its depth is what makes Tolkien Tolkien, what makes him timeless, what makes his story, a story that has continued to be read by countless people. And compared to that, we see what is about to kind of unfold in front of us. And I say that, I want to clarify, I say that expecting to be disappointed, but not wanting to be disappointed. I think that sometimes people get labeled as, haters. And I just want to say nothing would make me happier than to have Rings of Power come out and to watch it and to love it and to think this is an amazing, Tolkien story. But everything we've seen so far is just so shallow. And you can't have Tolkien and shallow in the same sentence. From the period of time that they're trying to adapt and the intent and the method that they've applied to adapting it, where they've expressed a complete willingness to just make up their own stories, to literally take Tolkien's stories and compress them, to eliminate nuance, to eliminate thousands of years and compress it into a contemporaneous timeline, to the casting and sort of the method that has been applied to which characters are being highlighted. I think that there's a problem in sort of casting and media representation right now, where we've been trapped in this idea that what I see has to resemble myself in order for me to appreciate it. Whereas what Tolkien understood was that if I give you a human character, regardless of whether or not that character is actually even human, you will necessarily be able to empathize with that character. And instead, we've taken that depth of emotional response and we've turned it into its most shallow sort of position or representation, where now we have actors who aren't even acting. They're playing themselves on screen. And instead of watching them and seeing the character and seeing them sort of practice their art and have the character come alive, I think that based on what we've seen so far and what the actors have said and what the showrunners and producers have said, I don't see how we're going to get something where the depth of the characters in the world are portrayed. I think instead we're going to see somebody holding a crude, dim mirror up to present society and just reflecting it back into our faces and saying, see, you can see yourself. And sure, that's what a mirror does. But Tolkien didn't hold a mirror to people. That's, again, the shallowest interpretation of what he did. Instead, he gave us something that showed humans and gave us an idea of something we could aspire to. Again, that aspirational nature of his story. And so by showing us ourselves and trying to represent and reflect ourselves the way that we are, we've removed that inspirational aspect. And instead, we've reduced everything to just that most basic, flat, just reflection. And I think that is an original sin of what they're doing at Amazon right now. I think that it is impossible for them to overcome that and end up with a good product. And that frustrates me as somebody who wants and wanted this to be better than that.
Has ever. This is Salty Texas C. I am Corey DB. Thanks so much for watching. If you've liked what you've seen and heard, please hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you on board. That way you know, and we have things like live streams, which we are going to be doing every Tuesday evening. Take care. I hope you're having a great 2022.